It's my pleasure to introduce our afternoon keynote speaker, Dr. Shahram Ebadollahi. Dr. Ebadollahi is the Vice President, Innovations and the Chief Science Officer, IBM Watson Health Group. As the head of innovations, he oversees development, solutions, and partnerships for IBM Watson Health Business Unit. As the Chief Science Officer, he has the global responsibility for the direction of IBM research in the area of health informatics and also the innovation strategy for IBM Watson Health. He and his team have conducted research in the broad area of health informatics with specific focus on computational healthcare, and also has enabled software and services in the area of data-driven analytics and big data for healthcare and life science applications. This is a very timely topic as we talked about the trends that are happening in digital health all through the day today. I think this is going to be a very timely topic that we're all looking forward to. Dr. Ebadollahi received his PhD and MS degrees in electrical engineering from Columbia University with a specialization in multimodal content analysis and retrieval and their applications to the domain of medicine. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ebadollahi to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the organizing committee for having me here. I'm so glad to be here and speaking with you about artificial intelligence in health and also about some of the topics that I heard came up in the question and answer around data and consent and management of that. So interesting times in healthcare, and a lot of these topics become very, very relevant. So what I will be talking about in the next 30 minutes or so, and I would like to engage in a conversation with you, so a 15 minutes question and answer after my remarks, is first about AI in general, before getting into the health aspects of it. Then I will present to you what we have been doing in Watson Health and bringing AI and what we call cognitive technologies into healthcare and life sciences applications. Give you examples of where they have been applied and how people are using them. Also, we'll talk to you about some of the more futuristic applications, some things that we are still doing in our research shop. We're working on them. And we'll close with the topic of security and blockchain, which I think is very, very relevant to some of the conversations that I heard in the previous panels. So, interesting times across industries. There are three things that have happened or are happening at the same time. One is tremendous growth in amount of data, and not just the amount of data and the variety and types of data. By some estimates, in year 2025, we will have 165 zettabytes of data. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of this data, I read somewhere that if a grain of rice is a byte, a zettabyte will fill up the Pacific Ocean, right? So just imagine the magnitude of the data. And this data is interesting in the sense that it's not just structured, it's not numbers, it's text, it's speech, it's image, it's video, it's data coming from devices, IoT, wearables, and all of those. And this is posing a new challenge on not just managing and storing this data, but how to extract meaning and insights from this data for making decisions at the right time. The second thing that is happening, or has happened alongside this growth of data, is infrastructure to manage the data and to do analytics on. So these days you hear a lot about cloud computing. So systems, technologies that can bring the compute power and apply it at scale to the data for different types of problems. And of course, with handling any sorts of data in any type of industry, the issue of security, privacy, and how dependable these systems are with respect to these mission-critical type of applications becomes very important. So a lot of advancements in that area as well. And the last but not least is, we talked about data and making sense of data, is this advancements that in the past, I would say 10 years, have been made in the area of called artificial intelligence. Of course, artificial intelligence is not new. In the mid-20th century, there was a lot of hype around artificial intelligence, but of course that all failed because I believe compute power and algorithms were not at the level that we see today. So there is a re-emergence, if you will, of artificial intelligence these days. And this is all about how machine can make sense of the data, these 165 zettabytes of data that we talked about, at scale for different types of applications. So extraction of insights using these algorithms. And we'll go into what we mean by artificial intelligence. This is not just on the engineering and science and technology aspect of it. There's a lot of funding that is going into this area of artificial intelligence across industries, which has been motivated by many applications. For example, if you're calling a call center for your credit card or for your phone bill, how to cope with the capacity required to handle these kind of requests becomes a challenging issue. So artificial intelligence can come to help with respect to analyzing speech, understanding speech, analyzing text, what needs to be done or said to that customer at that point of interaction. I read somewhere that every second, the video that gets uploaded and streamed through the internet, through the web, if you want to watch all of that, it will take you 5 years to watch those videos. How, if you're a video company, let's say Netflix or YouTube or something like that, how would you be able to sort through those videos, how to make it consumable for the types of people that you're trying to serve? And many, many other applications. By year 2020, 50% of our cars will be talking to each other and talking to some cloud and self-diagnosing or I mean, let alone the self-driving cars. How are you going to manage all these signals coming out of these cars? And we have had, so you see the investments and the growth of investments by VCs and companies in these areas. And where we land in this growth and evolution of artificial intelligence, I'll talk about it in a bit more. 2011, you probably remember we played Jeopardy on TV, and that was a showcase of artificial intelligence for a certain application. And then year 2014, we started a division in IBM focusing on bringing these kind of technologies to various industries, and then in 2015, starting Watson Health. So what we did in 2011, and 5-10 years before that, a lot of focused activity that led us to take on the challenge of playing against 2 all-time winners of this game on TV in front of millions of viewers. We put a system together that could do multiple things at the same time. It could understand text, read natural language as you and I can understand it, and do it at scale. It could do question and answering. It could do reasoning and inferencing. And it could do all of that at scale in sub-second. Because believe it or not, we weren't connected to the internet. We weren't allowed to be connected to the internet to participate in that game. So Watson at that point in time had to ingest everything and remember everything and be able to buzz under 3 seconds to be qualified to respond. Of course, we played that game, and the rest is history, and we won it. And that is actually the actual Watson system that sits in our offices in New York, the only instance of it that played Jeopardy. But what is interesting about it is a system that can do, at scale, question and answering, natural language processing, and reasoning and inferencing. So that, of course, was a game show. And as those of you who are familiar with that game show, there are lots of nuances about how these questions are posed. There are lots of ambiguities that goes into the question and the answers and so on. And it's very hard for the machine to figure those out. That was actually a feat of engineering to pull all of that together and be able to show it. But of course, we didn't build it to play a game. that was the start. And right after, we got asked to bring this machinery to various types of industries, healthcare being one of them. And if you think about why healthcare, there are lots of similar types of challenges in healthcare, lots of information to be sorted out. There's a lot of ambiguity. There are lots of unknowns, a lot of inferencing that needs to be done. There's a knowledge representation if you're in the area of cancer versus cardiology and so on, how you represent the world, how you understand the world, and how you can make decisions about it. So it was very natural to bring this technology to various types of scenarios and industries. So a lot of people throw out words like deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all of that, just to be on the same page. So let's talk about it in 3 stages. Machine learning is basically a set of statistical pattern recognition tools and technologies, understanding the world in a probabilistic manner, if you will, and being able to make associations and inferences based on those learned models. So in the process of machine learning, as it's captured in the word, you are showing the machine, the computer, examples of concepts or manifestations of concepts, and it internalizes, or it captures an internal picture or understanding or set of characteristics that distinguishes one concept from the other. So you're showing it pictures of cats and pictures of dogs. It understands nuances of color, texture, patterns, shapes, and so on and so forth to be able to sufficiently distinguish between classes of objects. It's as if we as humans learn how to distinguish different things by seeing many, many, many examples. Artificial intelligence, of course, is bigger than machine learning, but the resurgence of it, and nowadays you're hearing a lot about it, is because artificial intelligence these days is leveraging machine learning a lot. And a lot of these talk about artificial intelligence is because of the advancements in machine learning and also the hardware and software that is required to do these things at scale. And deep learning that you hear also about a lot is a subcategory of machine learning, right? So in machine learning, people have to describe what matters, what set of characteristics are important, and the machine will sort out and come up with the models. In deep learning, machine can automatically identify those attributes that are important. And it's been very successfully applied to the applications in imaging or speech and so on. What we call cognitive computing is yet another step above artificial intelligence. And this issue of two-way interaction between the symbiotic relationship between man and machine is not machine just computing things, that is fine, but how can one interact with the machine in order to derive a decision or get to a point of a decision making? And Watson today is actually a set of APIs, set of technologies in the cloud. So you cannot go, the box that I showed to you that was playing on Jeopardy, it doesn't, you cannot access it as such. It's a bunch of capabilities in the cloud. And you can see some of the examples. For example, speech to text, text to speech, recognition of image recognition, video recognition, and it speaks 9 languages at this point in time. And it's very interesting. It's not doing translation. It has learned that language and the nuances of it in the original language itself by seeing text examples of that language. And it also understands emotions. So when you're calling a call center, it can decipher, if you will, or understand your emotional state and prepare that call center person to have the right conversation with you on the other side of the phone. And we are increasingly adding to these capabilities and functions. So if you look at it, we are at actually a very interesting stage. We are in a world of cloud for scale of computing, content, is it healthcare content or other type of content, bringing these cognitive computing technologies, applying them at scale to that content, and through collaboration, addressing different challenges that people might have in different types of industries. So in healthcare, of course, one of the major areas for us and for all of you who are sitting here is healthcare essentially has become a data-driven practice and science, in the sense that everything has to be measured. There's a lot of talk around value-based payment, value-based contracting. When you talk about an outcome-based, when you're talking about outcome, we're talking about measurement of things. So you have to measure things, and that contributes to a lot of data generation. So through the adoption of electronic health record, through the adoption and increased, actually, diffusion of wearable IoT devices, if you will, consumer-driven type of exogenous data that is being gathered, and a lot of the discussion today was about that. Healthcare is one of the primary areas that these kind of technologies can help with respect to sifting through those data sets, making sense of them, and enabling someone to make a decision. And I'll show you examples of this as we go forward. So how Watson Health and what we have been doing and bringing AI to health has happened. So one track was the Jeopardy playing machine that I showed to you, Watson. But going back to 10, 15 years in IBM, we have been doing a lot of research in what people these days call big data in healthcare. So original algorithms and that can derive information and insights from lots of data, patient population longitudinal data, either coming from device or EHR or claims or other types of sources. And these two have come together, and in 2015 we announced the formation of Watson Health, and now doing this AI in health at scale with respect to in Watson Health. And if you look at what we are doing, I want to describe it in 3 layers. One is all the data and content. So is it electronic health record? Is it claims data? Is it genomics? Is it imaging or other types of data, patient-generated data? And also content, the knowledge sources, for example, books, publications, guidelines, and those kind of sources that are required in order to make a decision. On top of this, we have brought the very broad set of data-driven and knowledge-driven analytics, which I'll talk about in a second in more detail, and putting it on a platform that is HIPAA and GXP enabled, and with security and encryption and all of that, in order to now derive insights for different types of applications. And the applications that we are addressing at this point in time, I put them in 5 categories that you see here in the columns. In the area of oncology and genomics, for what we call Watson for Genomics, Watson for Oncology, and clinical trial matching. In government, social program management, social services, if you will, benefits of someone, and how to do case management around the needs of that particular person. In life sciences, in the area of clinical trials, drug discovery, and also patient safety, which very much relates to what we're discussing here. Value-based care, basically payer, provider, population health care management, care coordination types of scenarios. And imaging, which is actually a very interesting area for AI, is how machine can read the content of images, and because the radiologist or cardiologists or people who are dealing with images in health practice are dealing with lots of data. And as I said earlier, we are doing this in very tight collaboration with a lot of organizations, some of which you know or are represented here across pharma, medical device, payer and provider, and even governments and nonprofit institutions. So talking about our approach to analytics, I would like to define the analytics in 2 compartments. One is knowledge-driven, and both of them are useful in medicine and based on the types of work that you're trying to do. One is I have books, publications, and guidelines and repositories of knowledge that the task is, because I don't have the capacity to read hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, can the machine that never sleeps and 24/7 can read these documents, read all of that, distill the information, summarize it, and put it in front of me to make a decision, and also point me back to the sources of how it came up with those things. And that is very, very important in medicine. There is a lot of AI that is happening, which is, there is no audit trail, if you will, to go back to how these things happen. And I think in the domain of medicine, it's very, very important to have that visibility and that audit trail of how these algorithms function, if you will. And on the data-driven side, which is what you have been discussing since this morning, is I'm dealing with patient or consumer population longitudinal data, right? And the interest there is to look at ups and downs of those data sets being claim EHR data or patient-generated data and so on and so forth, to understand correlations between things, how things affect a particular observed outcome, how people are similar, clinically similar to each other, and how they group and what matters to what type of people. And these have applications in real-world evidence, in pharma and in medical device, in how population health is done, or how payers go about value-based contracting and payment type of scenarios. So now, switching gears to show you some of the examples. One of the key areas for us is the domain of oncology. And in there, we are doing three things. One is Watson for genomics. One is clinical trial matching. The other one is oncology. In oncology is the work that we started with Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, is ingesting guidelines, if you will, the publicly available and also institutional guidelines and care pathways, and using the physician or expert oncologists to train the machine for what type of scenarios, what patient presentation, with what symptoms and what basically characteristics that could be derived from the electronic health record, the text of the electronic health record, what suggestions to put in front of that oncologist with respect to their how they approach the patient, and also take into account the patient preferences. Now, this technology is in India, is in China, is in Thailand, is in community hospitals in the US, and people are using it. The issue there are two things. The issue of capacity. Not everyone is the top oncologist, but can they learn from the top oncologists in these kind of centers? So how to enable the broader community of care providers to be able to do good care at scale for this kind of patients. In clinical trial matching is very interesting scenario. So if someone needs to be recruited to a clinical trial, a cancer patient, every single hospital they go to, maybe they have 5 or 6 trials running at that hospital. But at any second, there are hundreds, if not thousands of trials at the country level that are happening. So what this system does, it taps into clinicaltrials.gov and also institutional, basically clinical trials. It reads the text of the electronic health record and automatically matches the patient with that a clinical trial that's going on, or it can also suggest addressable issues that if the doctor addresses these 2 issues, the patient becomes eligible for that clinical trial. And then in the genomics, which was actually the subject of a CBS 60 Minutes show on artificial intelligence in medicine, this is the work with UNC Chapel Hill Cancer Center. And the task is the doctors at the tumor board, where they're trying to decide what treatment or what trial to put this patient on, they don't have the time to read hundreds of thousands of publications. But there is a lot of science out there that might say something about the tumor, genetic makeup of the tumor of this patient. What drug, what pathways, and so on and so forth. So what this machine does, it reads all the PubMed and all the other type of articles that are available out there and points to those pathways and how they could be affected by the drugs that already has been scientifically, have gone through the randomized clinical trials and have been reported in scientific publications, and brings it to the attention of that oncologist, right? And the interesting thing in this particular scenario, these were actually published in a recent ASCO meeting. The machine, 99% of the time, agrees with the human, with the oncologist. And that talks to the issue of capacity. So it's very good, actually, that the machine now is agreeing and could actually be a helper to that oncologist. And in certain scenarios, points out certain treatment options that were overlooked but has been actually mentioned in scientific literature. Right? That becomes life-saving in scenarios. Another aspect of using Watson is in drug discovery. So this is referring to the ALS work with Barrow Neurological Institute, where, again, the machine is like a hypothesis generation tool for the researcher or the person who's working on drug development, in the sense that it goes into all the publications, understands the pathways, understands how a medication can actually affect that, and bring those to the attention of the researcher in order to shorten the time for coming up with the drug or a particular. This has also been used in immuno-oncology with one of the pharma companies, and shortened dramatically the time to come up with the hypothesis that now they can take to the lab and test them out in the lab. So switching gears a little bit, those were more knowledge-driven type of applications that I talked about. On the data-driven side, the work that we've been doing with Medtronic around their continuous glucose monitors is a companion app called Sugar.IQ. And what it does, it looks at the ups and downs of the device data captured by the device, the pattern of eating or the food, the activity patterns of the patient, the type 1 diabetic patient, puts all of those together, and also looks across the patient population who are using the device and the app, and can do several different things. One, it can follow a particular food and its effect on the glycemic control of that particular person. And also you can tag a particular food and to give you alerts if you have, when the last time you had such a food, what effect it had on you, so you should watch out for it. And on the research aspect of it, it's not in the tool, it's not in the market, but on the research side more, it also 3 hours ahead of time can predict the occurrence of hypoglycemic event. Based on advanced machine learning tools and AI, and looking at ups and downs of this data, not just for this patient, but across the population of clinically similar people to this person, to be able to predict with a high degree of accuracy the occurrence of hypoglycemic event as an early alert system for these type of patients. Another work is with Teva Pharmaceutical, and this is in the real-world evidence type of scenarios. As you can imagine, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies and also device companies, the engagement with the patient becomes very important to drive up adherence, to be able to provide information to the patient, and so on. So now is the issue of how to ingest device data, wearable data, IoT data, and do these kind of analytics to put people in different cohorts, what drives adherence or what drives non-adherence in certain population in order to how to approach that particular patient or subgroup of patients to drive up adherence or increase patient engagement. So now, slightly switching gears to more research type of work. These are not part of products, but more research. And these are all published, and you see some of the examples. So one of the core algorithms here is what we call patient similarity analytics, which becomes very, very important for what you have been discussing today, is how machine can automatically, knowing a particular objective measure, so for example, hemoglobin A1C management or other type of things, automatically, by very rich representation of the patient population, put people in different cohorts and know what characteristics matter to drive that particular objective, right? And this can now fuel various type of applications. For example, this is the work on predicting onset of heart failure 6 to 24 months ahead of time using electronic health record data. Very rich electronic health record data has been published in Circulation last October or November, and very sophisticated methodology on learning the signature from very large data sets that are indicative of onset of heart failure happening to someone when they are going to their physician for their annual checkup without any sign or symptoms of heart failure. So again, this is for prediction, for proactive care, if you will, for that patient population. Another advanced application is disease modeling. As people model speech patterns, so when you talk to your phone, it understands your speech. The way they come up with that is they record a lot of speech patterns, and then machine, through deep learning and artificial intelligence, learns those patterns of speech and associates it with different words that are spoken. So can we use the same methodology to learn disease progression model in people? So if I just look at electronic health records and ups and downs of data over a population, let's say COPD population, can I learn a disease progression model of that patient? So these are now the artificial intelligence or machine learning technologies enable us to go in this direction. Of course, this is very early stage research, but very interesting area. Or if I see a patient who was just diagnosed with heart failure and I don't know his or her future, but I have observed other people clinically similar to this person post such an event, can I map out what things could happen to this person based on different intervention methodology? Would they walk on a green path or would they walk on a red path based on the different interventions that I might choose for this person? Now, another thing is the work we are doing with Pfizer on research front on Parkinson's disease. This is quantification of a lot of qualitative assessment of Parkinson. That is, can we equip subjects with wearable devices, and if you will, it's like a dictionary, mapping the qualitative assessment of measures of Parkinson to objective measures that could be captured through wearable devices. Because now if you have that dictionary of qualitative, quantitative measurement association, now you can equip the patients with a very simple device. Maybe they can wear it on their wrist to be able to tell what is happening to them. And why you want to do that is to precise moment you give a drug to them, or what the pharma calls right drug at the right time to the right patient type of approaches, or even for discovery of drugs. And a topic that becomes very, very important in this area of AI and big data and health, we shouldn't forget behavioral economics, because whatever analytics you do and whatever insights you come up with, if the patient or the consumer doesn't act on it, it becomes actually useless. So behavioral economics on how to motivate, how to nudge the consumer, how to enable them to take the right action becomes a very important topic. Looking at time, I would like to actually just briefly talk about security. So security so far was, I have a hospital and I have an electronic medical record, how to safeguard that data. But nowadays, data is traveling. So you're talking about devices, you're talking about IoT, you're talking about mobile, patient-generated, life-driven type of data and events. And these are all subject to security measures, or should be subject to security measures. And you know all about the news of ransomware and all of these things that are happening in healthcare. So we take a very comprehensive look at this, not just the traditional methodologies of safeguarding data and doing cybersecurity, but now also bringing cognitive technologies in order to sift through a lot of patterns and derive from it indicators of things before they happen, and get in front of these kind of breaches and issues that can happen. And I would like to close with a slide which I actually put in after I heard the discussions earlier today, and that is blockchain. So blockchain, you probably have heard about it in Bitcoin, but what I'm talking about here, it doesn't have anything to do with Bitcoin or financial. Is actually the underlying system is very interesting in the sense that wherever you have many point-to-point interactions and there are many give and take between different people, blockchain becomes a very interesting solution in order to create a community for value exchange, whatever the definition of value. And what it can bring is audit trail, is privacy, is security, is visibility, and is conflict resolution between these different parties. In healthcare, I think it has applications to several areas. One is what I call person-mediated health data exchange. Can we put the patient or the consumer at the center of consent for data, and based on their consent, without the need to pull all the data in one place, leaving the data wherever it sits. Now that I have the consent, can I route the data from one place to the other place? So if you're talking about devices and polling devices and getting real-world data from devices in order to feed into analytics and real-world evidence, we have to get out of the EHR type of scenario, because that is an aspect of the data. A lot of it is life-driven, patient-generated type of data. How to be able to tap into that, but the most important thing is how to put the consumer or patient at the very center of that permission. So actually, earlier this year, we started a research project with the FDA on this patient-mediated data exchange. And actually now it's a running system for genomics data and based on people's or owners' consent, if you will. So I highly recommend taking a look at that. The other applications of it, which also very applicable to the discussion you had here today, is outcome-based contracting. Because if I'm a payer and the other side is a medical device company or a pharma company or a provider organization, how to have visibility in the outcomes that were produced or not produced, and how to make sure that we can do contracting based on those audit trail and the visibility of the outcomes. And the other application is clinical trial transformation, because in clinical trial you have a lot of subjects, you have a lot of PIs, investigators, sites, and so on. A lot of documents get produced in that process before they get packaged and as a dossier sent to the regulator. Whenever you have duplication of documents, whenever you have so many different people in that process, blockchain becomes a very interesting scenario to look at. I'm very actually passionate about this area. I think the combination of this for data with the AI on top and the right solution areas that I explained some of them makes this juncture in time, a very, very interesting time in healthcare and life sciences and all the things that you're doing here. So thank you so much for your attention. I think we have 5-10 minutes for question and answers.
Excellent presentation. I wanted to follow up, Shahram, on your comment on heart failure predictive modeling. It was inferred, but I want to confirm that there actually was some sort of intervention that resulted in a better outcome for the patient, keeping them out of the hospital or some sort of outcome benefit. Yeah.
So that work that I mentioned, it was a research project. So actually that intervention is a second, if you will, project or research after that. So now if I have such a model for being able to give proactive care to people, what type of intervention I need to provide to people when they go for their annual checkups, and if I see such a signal or signature at that point of time. I think that is the follow-on work to that. And this paper, as I mentioned, was published in last October, November of 2016, actually. Yeah.
Any other questions? Another minute. Chip has a question.
So I have a dumb layman's question. So my favorite app on my phone is the Google Maps, where I get to look real time and I see which roads are blocked and which ones are not. And I understand the way it works is, GPS is downloaded from all the cell phones, from all of us sort of going all over the place, and they can, interpolate that to figure out where the blockages are. Is there something analogous for the healthcare system to that? I mean, is it possible that you could look across the whole nation where heart failure was starting to happen or diabetes-related issues? So just speculative.
So not quite the same. Of course, some people have tried to use these search engines for public health type of disease progression and so on with some degree of success. But what I talked about, as I refer to it as patient similarity, if such a countrywide deep data is available, there are technologies to find those kind of, if you will, blockages, as your example of a map, in the system, whatever the definition might be. I think the issue is lack of data or lack of sufficient depth of data. And when we talk about data, I mean, just to elaborate on that, there are 4 or 5 dimensions of it that become very important, because data has depth, it has breadth. So depth is how much I know about the particular person. Breadth is how many things I know about the person. Is it EHR, is it claims, is it genomics, imaging, and whatnot? Is the length of the data that I know about this person? Is episode of 2-3 days, or is longitudinal over 10 years or 20 years or so on? And then is the volume, is what the patient or subject population. I think today's state of healthcare and healthcare-related data is very different based on whatever application that someone is interested in. The world that you're describing, from the technology point of view, is possible. Is the data that doesn't exist. So that description of the blockchain that I gave, imagine this world of future where you and I, in our cell phone, can put our fingerprint and give access to and permit 2 people to see our data for a certain duration of time, certain application. That becomes actually more possible. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Participating today, actively participating. I think it was an excellent, excellent program. Before we close, I had a couple comments, and the most important one is I want to recognize the MDIC team that put this together, because we're a small group, and this is a big event for our small group. And in particular, I want to recognize my assistant, Jillian Pretty, who bore the brunt of getting this all put together, and I think she did an excellent job. So let's Jillian, she sits in the back. She likes to be kind of behind the scenes, but thank you for your contributions here. You did a wonderful job, as did the whole team, as did everybody that participated today, because it's because of your participation in our projects that we had such a successful day today, and the engagement of everybody. And I think you got a sense for the depth and breadth of the work we're doing and the impact we're having. So I look forward to next year and the work that we can share at that point in time. Have a great evening.